Hey there, all you lifelong learners out there. The book Ian Mann will be reviewing this evening is Questions Are the Answer by Hal Gregerson. It's a breakthrough approach to getting all your vexing problems sorted out, both personally and at work. So, thanks very much, Ian. Wonderful to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, as always, Ian, and you've told me this once before, you've said that you don't read a book, that if it's not a good book, and you work that out in the first while. So, given the fact that there's no such thing as a stupid question, tell us a bit more about what you found fascinating in this book.
I tell you what the issue is. I think that we know that Einstein famously said, if I had an existential problem that was really vexing, and I have to have a solution to that problem, and I only have 1 hour to find the solution, I'm under real pressure, 1 hour. He says, I'd spend 55 minutes trying to craft the correct question, and I'll answer it in 5 minutes. Our biggest problem is that we don't craft the right questions, and that literally behind every single breakthrough, it's somebody asking a better question about something. Because he's asked a better question, he's able to come up with a really interesting answer. And I think this is vastly underrated. And it's one of those things we really need to start taking very, very seriously. And it's not that he wasn't the only guy. Everybody's talking about it. I mean, if you go back to Peter Drucker, the 20th century guru, Peter Drucker said, there are few things as useless, if not dangerous, as the right answer to the wrong question.
It's like the difference between doing things right and doing the right things, isn't it?
Indeed. And I think that's it. We have to worry a lot about this. And I think that the problem is that we need leaders to start thinking about questioning very differently. And I'll tell you why. Gregerson describes a conference he was once giving. Now, he teaches at MIT. If you're an MIT professor, you don't give lectures to micro enterprises. You give lectures to the biggest companies in the United States. So he's giving a course to these captains of industry and talking about the importance of questions. And he says, one man in the audience said to him at the end of it, he said, Professor, you're telling us that we've got to ask good questions, that the job of a leader today is to be the chief questioner, asking the best questions. He says, I got to where I got because I was the go-to person, the person you went to if you wanted answers. He says, I have no idea how to ask good questions. My whole life is built up. I'm the one who has all the answers. And I think that it's a profound issue. It's a profound issue. We've spent a lot of time believing that the really smart guys, the guys who've got all the answers. We've never stopped and said, no, the really smart guys. In fact, there's a Nobel laureate. He's an Egyptian. His name is Najib Mahfouz. And he said, you can tell whether people are clever by their answers. He says, you can tell whether they're wise by their questions.
Oh, that's so clever.
Yeah. And we've got to get this question asking thing. I'll tell you why it's so important. Firstly, I think it always was important. But I'll tell you why I think it's so important now. And it's so important now mainly because the world is too complicated. We don't have all the answers. People don't have the answers. No. And I think that our challenge is to try and work out how we can possibly ask better and better questions. And what's nice about the book is he has some examples.
It's a bit like Simon Sinek and his why, so what is your why? And I think that's quite important.
And he said, you can tell whether people are clever by their answers. He says, you can tell whether they're wise by their.
Okay, sorry, were you with me, Ian?
Yes, I'm with you.
I was just talking about Simon Sinek and his why. And I think that's so important because often we get asked to do something, and when you say to them why, they don't always have the answers.
Yes. Yes. I think that's we have to start We have to ask better and better questions. He's got a lovely idea. We all know about brainstorming.
Yes.
And you get a whole bunch of people together and they sit around and they try as fast as they can. Say, you've got 10 minutes to do this, and let's see if we can come up with 20 really great answers to a question or real good suggestions as to what to do. He turns on his head and he says he's done this quite often. It's worked very nicely. He calls it a question burst. What he says is invite people who if you've got a pressing problem. Now, a pressing problem today could be, it's a pressing problem I come across a lot. People say, how can I prevent the company that people built from hurting them? These people have actually built this company, and I'm going to have to hurt them. How can I prevent that? That's a hard question. Now, if you wanted to deal with a hard question like that, when you said things are going wrong here, you haven't got it yet. You ask yourself, what's really, really going wrong? You've got to say at the end, what's the most important thing that's going wrong? Why do I feel like this? You feel like this because the people who you relied on to build your company are now going to be hurt by it. And you've got to do something. So that's your challenge. He says, if you have a challenge, that one or any other one, get a group of people who come from very different viewpoints of things, different levels of anything, different levels of understanding, different levels of insight, different contexts. Get them into a room and say to them, I'm going to tell you what my problem is. And he says, tell them the problem as fast as you possibly can. You don't want to elaborate because then you can give them the answers. So just tell them what the problem is as short as you possibly can. And then he says no more than 2 minutes. Then he says, get them to ask what questions you should be asking. So instead of having a mindstorming solution-based program, you ask them, what are the most important questions I've got to ask? And he says, we're going to get 20 questions and we've got 4 minutes to get it into. Now, get those 20 minutes in. The reason he says keep it as short as you possibly can, because nobody must give any explanations. Just tell me what the question is. Don't tell me why you got it, why it's a great question. Just formulate a question. Let's bang out as many questions as we possibly can in our 4 minutes. When that's all done, he said, now what we can do is we can start to think about how I can mix those up, change them on my own, unpack them, and choose the ones that will really help me solve this problem. But I like this idea of you've got to find the right problem. If you don't find the right problem, you're going to answer the wrong question.
Sure.
So that's a really nice one. I think so. He also talks about that. We all know about reframing. Yes, you must reframe. Now, you ask, so what exactly do you mean by reframing? How do you reframe anything? What actually is it? And I think that he gives an example, and I'll tell you why I think it's important, because the book was written before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, a lot of people's jobs are changing. They're either changing or they've gone away, or they're going to change, or they might go away. And people have to ask some very serious questions about what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? And I think it's when you I've always been a dental hygienist. I've always been a computer programmer. I've always been a manager of a store. What's going to happen to me? When you start thinking like that, you need to ask 3 questions, but very slowly, very slowly. The first question is, who are you? Now, it's not, I'm a doctor, I trained at Wits. Now, who are you really? I'm somebody who's...
That's what you do, hey, isn't it?
Yeah, it's who am I really? I'm really a person who's very sympathetic to people who are in pain. Physical pain or emotional pain, or just their lives are just, I'm very sympathetic to that. Terrific. Maybe you can build on that. You were an accountant, but what are you really good at? I'm really good at organizing things for people. And one of my clients is in a business that's really going away very fast. And we unpacked what is it that she's really good at. And what she's really good at, she is very organized and she gets the job done. And I said, you know what? As we unpack this, can you make money out of that? So the next question you have to say, well, okay, who are you? And then what is it that you know better than anybody else? And what she knows better than anybody else is how to, focusing on the detail, how to get stuff done. I don't think I've ever met somebody who gets things done as well as she does. She just makes it happen.
It's amazing.
And then the third thing is, who do you know? Who do you know who could help you monetize these characteristics you have? So there will be a reframing of, I'll give you an example of one man called Palmer Lucky. Palmer Lucky was, when he was asked this question of himself, he said, I'm a homeschool tech genius. That's who I am. Yeah. And what does he know? What do you know better than other people? He said he's always been fascinated by VR headsets, virtual reality headsets. Virtual reality headsets became great, nice idea, and then dipped away and came back a bit again. Anyway, he was in them, and he built really, really good, really clever VR headsets. Next questions. Who do you know? Well, he's a gamer, and gamers just love the stuff. So he was a gamer who was really good at VR headsets. And who do you know? He says, I know a lot of other 3D gamers who would really like this stuff. And so he asked them, listen, I made these beautiful goggles, try them. Would you be prepared to buy this? And they all agreed that they would love to buy it. It allowed him to raise $250,000.
Sure.
On which he started building his business. To cut a long story short, Oculus Rift was bought by Facebook for $2.3 billion. That was him. So here's a guy who found something. Otherwise, if he hadn't asked these questions, hadn't used his network, hadn't worked out what's unique about what he knows or understands, and everybody's got this. The person who I told you is very good at organizing, I really believe that she's going to make a really, really good living organizing the lives of a lot of people who are older and have got money. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Your present company excluded. How many people can say, if I drop dead tomorrow, all my affairs are in order, people will know where everything is, the important issues have been sorted out, they've taken place, they've been structured, they're put in the right place, they're all documented, whether it's my photographs, my history, anything at all. My life is in order. Now, most people who've been successful have been very, very busy being successful. Sure. And never had enough time to like work through all the stuff and make sense of it. And somebody like that can find a neat career, which is certainly enough to sustain one person, and doing exactly that. And there's lots of things like that. So I think this idea of reframing what the question is, not how can I find another job as an architect? It's what am I really good at? What am I really good at? Okay. Who do I know who would be interested in stuff like that? And then how can I get this out there? And I think it's a very nice way of reframing what you're doing as opposed to saying, this is me. I'm not going to ask any, I'm going to see myself exactly as everybody else has framed me. So
I think you're right. It was interesting. I was just watching a video the other day with Richard Branson again, and he was saying that if you can find something that other people need, even if they don't know they need it right now, but if you can find something that they need and they could find a use in, he says you're okay. And that's exactly what you're echoing now.
Yeah.
So
when Henry Ford started his business, he said, I never did market research. He said, because if I'd asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah, exactly. That's brilliant. Yeah, and that's like not very useful, hey?
No, not at all. Yeah. The other thing about when you come up with new stuff, there's always a tendency when you've got a real problem, there's a tendency to start working on it. What's interesting is the part that you start working on tends to be the easy part, not the hard part. There's a joke that's proliferated in Google, in certain sections of Google. They say if you had a problem of trying to get a monkey to sit on a pole and recite Shakespeare, the people will start building a pole.
Yeah.
And the hard part is how do you teach a monkey to recite Shakespeare? So we seem to tackle. Let me tackle the easy stuff quickly. Okay.
Well, don't you think that gives us encouragement to then move on to the more difficult thing?
Well, the thing is that you can get so caught up in worrying about polls, which are not relevant at all. Start training monkeys.
I get where they're coming from, though.
There's a very good question that I've read about late, and it's become quite a famous question only because Clayton Christensen once mentioned it and then mentioned over and over again, and actually wrote a book about it. It's nice. Once you've got the point, you don't need to read the whole book. Anyway, the thing was this: he had some students who were doing some market research on essentially like an ice cream shop that sells ice creams and milkshakes and stuff like that. They wanted to improve their milkshake turnover. So he said to them, before you do anything else, find out who's buying milkshakes, when they buy it, and that stuff. So they did demographic as perfectly normal. What they discovered by mistake was that most milkshakes in this store are bought before 9 o'clock in the morning. They asked us one second, I know they're Americans, but who drinks milkshake before 9 o'clock in the morning? Mm-hmm. So he framed the question for them, which I think is frameable for absolutely every single thing you do, because I'm using it all the time, and I can see how many amazing opportunities there are for using it. He said, go to these people and ask them, what is the job that you're paying a milkshake to do? Okay. Now, you obviously, it's a nice way of looking at it, right? What's the job I'm paying for this milkshake to do?
Yeah, it's like a pick-me-up or something.
What they just would, as opposed to saying, I like the strawberry, I like the vanilla, find out what the job is. And the job is very simple. Most of the people said, I have a long commute in the morning. If I buy a cup of coffee, it's cold in 10 minutes. If I take a couple of bananas, you just feel full. He said a milkshake can sip on for a really long time. Now, if you wanted to make a better milkshake, or you wouldn't change the flavor. All you do is you might change the size of the straw because people will sip fast or slow, either whichever one you wish. But you do something with the milkshake has got a job, certainly for commuters in the morning. You can find milkshakes might have other jobs later in the day. I mean, if you see a divorced father, walking with a 6-year-old kid into a milkshake store at 6 o'clock in the evening, as he's taking the kid back to mom, and he's buying the kid a milkshake, what's the job of the milkshake? The job of the milkshake is revenge. It's revenge. He can't stand his wife for having walked out on him, and he wants to return a boy full of sugar, and he won't eat his dinner.
Oh, that's vicious. I thought it was to leave him with a good
feeling
that he'll come back for, but you're probably quite right. It's rather vicious, though, isn't it?
So my figuring is this: we need to ask the questions. What is the job? And you can ask it in a more serious way. What is the job that Uber does that taxi doesn't do? What is the job that this particular drink or people or restaurant can do that others can't do? You might really come up with something which is more useful. So we've got to ask the right questions.
The other thing that I see his book says he's got for personal problems as well as business problems. So
absolutely.
How do you introduce that into it?
I unfortunately, my focus has always been on the business side. So even reading his book, I was always looking at the business stuff. But I threw in one. It wasn't actually in the book about the revenge of the milkshake. That was my one, but it's not in the book. But obviously, all this stuff can be used everywhere.
Okay.
And if you ever look at this, what's his name? Sakichi Toyoda, the founder of Toyota. He used to always say you've got to ask 5 questions. So let's just try this one. You send your child to a private school. Mm-hmm. Why do you send your child to a private school? Because I want her to get a good education.
Sure.
Does sending a child to a private school necessarily mean she gets a good education? Yes, it does. What does a good education mean?
Yeah, it's all in the definition.
And you keep asking 5 questions, one after another, 5 times. Ask why 5 times. Every single time I've ever done that, we come up with great stuff at the end. So I would urge, one of the things, if you want, when somebody says, what do you mean I'm going to ask questions? I don't know what questions to ask. Here's exactly what to do. When somebody's got a presentation, you say, was that a good one? Say, yeah, that's a good idea. So why do you think it's a good idea? This is because it's going to make us money. Why do you think making us money necessarily means it's good?
Yeah.
We can make money selling Coke to kids.
Exactly.
The stuff you sniff, not the stuff you drink. So why do you think? And you keep asking 5 whys under all circumstances. And I think it'll start building up your ability to ask really good questions. But there's one other thing about the book, which I just want to share with you, and this is really the last bit. Questions need the right environment to flourish. Let's just start off like this. You've seen this a lot. You see people in the boardroom who don't ask anything. They ask and the reason they don't ask questions, even that they're concerned about, is because they're not sure whether somebody at my level is allowed to ask that question. Will I be seen as impudent? I also don't ask that question because I'm afraid you might say, you mean you don't know the answer? Yeah. Somebody at your level should know the answer, Yeah. So we don't ask questions because we don't want to sound dumb or we don't want to sound forward. And there are questions that you're not supposed to ask, depending on your level. When you were a little kid, you probably wouldn't ask questions in class that might embarrass you. You knew it. You certainly didn't ask questions, Auntie, why are you so fat? You somebody like 50 in the belly and says, hey, don't talk like that. And so the things you didn't do, you're constrained. We grew up as constrained question askers. And what we've got to do is we've got to create an environment which is really, really safe for people to ask questions. Absolutely. If we don't create an environment in which people feel safe to ask questions, they won't ask questions. And I think that the people who grew up in homes which were very questioning are more likely to be better question askers later. And there's probably the best. We had a woman in our company who would teach people how to be assertive. But I think one of the most important parts of being not even assertive, but of having that confidence to ask questions and say, this may be a dumb question, but answer it for me anyway. I want to know. And when you don't feel that I've got to be, people will prejudge me. You probably will find that once you've asked that question, a lot of people in the room say, thank goodness he did. I didn't understand it either. And we need to create environments where people, we talk about humble inquiry. We need to create environments in which people feel very, very comfortable asking questions. And the way that you treat the asking of questions is going to work out whether people are going to ask more or going to ask less.
And I think it also determines, so we work with the concept of appreciative inquiry. Mm-hmm. So, it's very similar, but it's the way in which you ask the question. It's not an attacking mechanism, because as soon as you attack, the result you get is defense.
Yes.
So, question asking, I think, is really a useful tool, but I think it's how you ask the question as well as how you answer it. Otherwise, it could just be a big fight, I think.
Yeah, I think. But you see, I figure that if there's a leader and he's got a team of 10 people, it's much easier to train him to encourage the asking of questions. And the easiest way to encourage the asking of questions is for him to ask questions.
Absolutely.
And we say there's no such thing as a stupid question, which means I'm probably sure your question is going to be stupid, so ask it anyway. We will try not to embarrass you. But I think if you just know that around here we're more interested in questions than we are in answers, and we'll get far, far further if we keep asking questions than we'll ever get if we only think we've got to have smart answers. It's a complete mind shift. The leader's got to be the chief questioner.
I think you can teach people the skills like appreciative inquiry, so that I never knew about those things when I was in my 20s. I don't know if you did, but I didn't. I learned about it the hard way.
Yes.
Having people
Yeah.
attack me.
Yes.
I worked out, okay, there must be a better way to do this. But, if you could teach younger people these skills, wouldn't that be marvelous?
I think
We'd
it
have
would.
more people asking questions, far better conversations, and far better results from them.
I remember, it's so funny, just flash back to me now. My father told me about a professor he'd met who'd won some amazing award in physics. And he said to him, how did this all happen to you? And he said when he was a little child and he went to school, his mother when he came back from school, his mother would say to him, "Okay, son, did you ask any good questions today?"
Very cool.
Now, it's not how many, did you manage to answer all the questions? No. Did you ask any good questions today? That was like what she was really concerned with. He says he believes that's what gave him an inquiring mind that made him to a really good scientist.
And isn't that such a fantastic, what do you call it, value to have, is curiosity? Because I think it keeps you young. It builds business, it builds character, so what a brilliant thing to do.
It is, and I think that's a nice way to start. Just as a leader, start asking questions, legitimize the asking of questions, and do the same thing to your kids and everybody else you possibly can.
I think so. So I think for everybody who's interested in how to ask questions and wanting to ask questions, this book would be of great value to you. And Ian, I think then that's us done for this evening. You agree?
It is. Thank you.
Good. Then I think for everybody who wants to have a chat with Ian, his details will be below. If you want to speak to me, my details are below there as well. And Ian, any final word from you?
No, other than this isn't a hard thing to do. And the reason why I particularly picked the 5 whys, it's just such an easy thing to do. If you just remember that it's really valuable to do.
It is. I agree with you. It's a bit like swapping out the word and for but, or but for and.
Indeed.
It's the same thing. It's a big mind shift change. Thank you very much, as always. It's been wonderful having you. And we'll see you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thanks.
So, thanks everybody. If you found this useful, please hit the like button, subscribe, follow, share. More importantly, talk to us. You can complete a consultation form on the contact page below. And thank you for your time, as always.